Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Ape Escape. In the last part, we finished off the game, and now we're continuing on through our second lap of the levels in order to get all the monkeys we couldn't catch before. Even though it really feels like in some cases, we should have been able to catch some of them, as I brought up time and time again. The magic punch, I really don't like how they handled that as an item. Now, the way that I'm structuring the latter, it's more or less third of this LP, is I'm showing off anything new in a level, absolutely, that we haven't seen, because of certain tools we didn't have at certain times, there are some chunks of the level we didn't see, and there's some I didn't show off, period, just due to me having other monkeys I wanted to get instead. But very often starting, I think from the next level, if there's a common piece of the level we've been in before, I'm going to speed up the level at that point just to get to a point where there's something we haven't seen. Since at that point, it's the same level, there's no real point not to in my eyes. That's going to come really in play in the latter 4 worlds, I think, in the game. I think World 3 Beyond is what's going to get a lot more use. As in the early levels, there's only like 1 or 2 monkeys you haven't grabbed yet, and usually they are very quick to find, so there's no real point to fast forwarding at that point in my eyes. For instance, we got this monkey here who throws bombs, and you gotta bonk them back with the stun club. I think you can also use the magic puncher, but I think the stun club's better for aiming with this. 3 times until the Triceratops just has enough of this monkey's shit and throws them off. In a way, eerily similar to King Dodongo to me. Also, there's, I think, some cookies and I think a 1-up around this platform that the Triceratops is on. But I find getting hit by it surprisingly hard, so no real point to me. And you can only access that particular area after you've gotten the slingshot, of course. And I think the only monkeys we haven't gotten yet left in this level, one of them is just behind the waterfall, who you can get instead of going into the T-Rex cave. Slightly to my right at the moment. And I think the only other one I haven't gotten yet is on top of the waterfall? Yes. But I believe... No, you actually have to wait to get this one too. You need the propeller to get this. So I think you need to go into the T-Rex cave no matter what on the first visit. Huh. Could have sworn you could have been able to come up here, but you know what? I'm probably thinking of playthroughs where I come back earlier. Because there are times where the moment I get a new tool, I go back to get the monkeys I couldn't before, especially after I get the propeller. But at the same time, there's a lot of playthroughs where I don't, just because that depending on the level, that could mean you have to visit it upwards of 4 times. And, it's not exactly the way I would prefer to play a game in this way. Thankfully, while you can... Well, you always have to visit a level twice no matter what to get every monkey. Most of the levels in the game, I find, you can still get every Specter coin in on the first visit. Most. A good amount of, at least. I'd say over half of them. Usually, the Specter coins you can't get are in the sections that have monkeys you couldn't get on a first visit. Like in Thick Jungle, there's one that you can't get until you at least get the propeller, I know for a fact, in the first area. And there's some that you just can't reach, period, because they're behind some wall that you need to destroy. Thick Jungle, for instance, is a level that has a lot of monkeys we couldn't get before, and a lot of them required just the propeller. For instance, we can now go this way through this forest passageway at the very start of the level to access, I think, like 3 or 4 different monkeys that we couldn't before. Mind you, I say you need the propeller to access a lot of the areas we're going to be going through in these second laps. Technically, you don't. You just need the slingshot and the precise ability to learn how to do that one glitch I talked about when we got the slingshot, where you can basically jump infinitely. But that's a little more technically complicated. And depending on if you're playing the remake or not, I think impossible? I don't think that tricks in the remake. I don't think I've actually watched a speedrun on the remake, though. And here we have the mini-boss that's only in this level, this tree. The way it works, it's got 2 pom-poms made of branches that you need to take out because it'll use it to guard its main body. Hit them with the stun club, and then you do about 3 strikes in the main body before running the hell away, because after it recovers from being stunned, it does a swipe across. It can bounce its hands on the ground to do some attacks. I think it can just punch you directly. It's more or less just a stronger enemy variant, though, and I think it takes a little bit too long to fight, and there's 2 of them in this stage. We haven't fought one of them yet. But I believe if you're careful enough, you can sneak up on the monkey in question. So you don't need to fight. Oh, that was unfortunate. That is bottomless pit down there. At this point, the Specter coins are not necessary for anything but just getting a 100% marking on the save file. Because I've unlocked all 3 minigames, I think, by the end of World 6 on the first run. If not, like, mid-World 5, somewhere around there. By and large, at this point, you can stop collecting them unless you want to see that pretty 100 number on your save file. And I don't recall getting anything for 100% proper outside of just bragging rights, so it's not even like you get a special unlock, like a higher difficulty or anything. Like, the only unlockables of sort we're not showing off in this LP is that there's some amount of cheat codes. Not too many. I can only recall 3 off the top of my head. 2 of them increase the capacity for your limited ammo slingshots, and another's debug mode. I believe to access the explosive bullet upgrade, which allows you to have 99 explosive ammo instead of 9, you pause the game and then input R2 down, L2 up, right down, right left. And there's one for the guided ammo as well, which I think is the same thing, but you do left, right, L1, R2, R1, L2. I believe if you do those right, you'll hear a chime. And as for debug mode, which I've, I think, only accessed once, you pause, hold down L1, and then press down twice in triangle in a very quick succession or something like that. It's not very useful. Debug modes are odd in that I find they're generally more interesting to mess around with in 2D games, because in 3D games sometimes you just get some weird control issues, because in some regards you meant to use 2 controllers to access debug mode with how they worked. I think the only one I put a lot of time into with my limited time with the game as it was, so to speak, was Jak 2 and 3. Because growing up, I didn't own those games. I borrowed them from my local library. And after I finished them, and I still had time before I had to take them back to the library, I messed around with debug mode after figuring out about that online. And it was funny seeing Jak glide across the cityscape. It actually allowed me to finish off getting all the Dark Jak power-ups in Jak 2, because they require a lot from you in that game. And Jak 2 has a lot of problems outside of that. Now, something I do like about what they do for a lot of these extra routes in Ape Escape is they usually loop back to places you get to otherwise in the level. Like, Thick Jungle is sort of shaped in a way like a figure 8 with a one-way offshoot towards the bottom, sort of like it's almost like certain versions of the ampersand. Because we're now back at the loop where we came out from the fish area with the giant catfish that I completely ignored when we were in there. Where we, I think, first saw the tutorial for how to access and mess around with rotating switches. I like that they do that for a good amount of the levels in this game, and they do it as well for the series, period. But there's also a lot of levels in this game and in the sequels that's just a bunch of one-way passageways you kind of have to walk back out of eventually. Though they are pretty nice in the series usually when it comes to those, and that usually the one-way passageways aren't like an endless hallway, so to speak. Like, they're usually like 1 or 2 roams long period, and then you can just loop back from there. And now I want to try and sneak up on this monkey, because it's time for this second of the mini-bosses. I theoretically could have shown this one off way back when we were first in the level, and I could have caught the monkey there, but I was just far away enough. That's tragic. But theoretically, I suppose you could say this is the first boss fight in the game because they actively give you a cookie jar, but no. I am glad they really improved on the bosses in Ape Escape 2 and 3, because it really is this game's worst feature, so to speak, is the lack thereof almost, because in some regards, the first actual boss fight is the final boss. because in some ways, the giant knight at the end of Crumbling Castle is just closer to an upgrade of the mini-boss. I guess in that regard, if you wanted to look at it like that, the first boss is the airship at the TV tower, but I could have grabbed that particular Specter coin when we were first in the level, but I didn't because I realized I had to come back here anyway, so I might as well have saved it. Something I do also appreciate about the levels in the Ape Escape trilogy, and we'll see this a bit more as we go through. While levels do tend to get longer the further you get into an Ape Escape, they usually like to put shorter levels between very long levels, just to give you a bit of a breather. For instance, Thick Jungle here and, is it Dark Ruins? That's the next level. Like, those are longer levels that are surrounded by shorter levels. And they do a good job of keeping that good pace going so you have some breathers and you don't feel like some areas are dragging on nearly as long. And they do a good job throughout the series, I feel, of having good set pieces so you remember not only the rough layout of a level after you explored it for a few minutes, but also so that some levels stick into your mind. Although, admittedly, I think the game that's the best at that particular thing with set pieces is Ape Escape 3. And that's mostly because Ape Escape 3 completely throws away any kind of quote-unquote realism the series had in its level designs. Because, by and large, with the exception of maybe the dinosaur levels and, I guess technically the ice levels, well, I say that completely ignoring the level where you go into a dinosaur's innards. Either way, Ape Escape 1 and 2, to an extent as well, are a lot more grounded than Ape Escape 3 is in terms of its level choices, because Ape Escape 3 goes for the whole TV show angle. And because of that, I feel Ape Escape 3 really decides to go super silly and super memorable with its levels. Like, I can remember most of the aesthetics from Ape Escape 3. Whereas in Ape Escape 1 and 2, they very much blend together, and sometimes I can't remember some of them because they're such a common choice of aesthetic. Like, for instance, in Ape Escape 1, the ice levels are just ice levels, whereas in Ape Escape 3, you're maybe climbing Mount Everest fighting the Yetis, or you're going to Santa Claus's village, things like that. Things that are a lot more specific within the general aesthetic type, and I really like that. The level I immediately think of when I think of Ape Escape 3, though, there's two in particular. Actually, no, three. I think of the one cowboy stage where you're climbing the rope. I think of the one ruins stage where particularly there's a monkey on a raft who's one of the ones who is stunned if you're playing as the character Yumi in that game because of her little buff. And then I think of the level that I mentioned a couple times already with the giant miniature model of a town that you put the RC car through. Actually, no, 4, because I also think of the plains stage. Now, this section of the level over here, we could have ventured over to when we first were here. It's just a lot easier now that we have the propeller, because you really want to master the double jump to jump across those platforms. If you're not good with the timing of it or controlling Spike yet when you're first in the level, you're probably going to have trouble making those jumps. Not that there's too many monkeys you'd be able to grab over here easily on the first run through the stage, as you can easily grab the monkey I just grabbed, and if you go through the door that was just in front of Spike a moment ago, you could grab the monkey I grabbed at the very start of the stage. But the monkeys down here in the temple itself, you might need a couple more tools to catch any kind of reliably, because I hate this section of the level. We got these monkey statues who will jump out at you in these particular corners. They don't seem too annoying until you realize what's going on here. We got a big monkey chase. They will jump over these giant sections here while you have to go around the slow sides or trying to use the repeller in some regard to get around it. The moment you try to catch up to them, they will just continue running away, and you need to step on these switches to raise the door up, potentially giving them time to escape you. These monkey statues are here to blindside you and do that exact thing that this one just did to me. The two different sides of this temple have two different jump puzzles. The one we just went through isn't even technically a jump puzzle. I just make it into that because I'm dumb. You're supposed to hug the walls and avoid the sections that are being pushed out right out of Sunset Vista from Crash 1. Over here, though, we have a bunch of platforms that slowly start sinking back into the wall after you get off the switch, and you need to time very specific jumps. I think you outright need the propeller for these, if not a very precise double jump. Now, This first monkey we have to do this for isn't too bad, but after we go get the next monkey, another monkey spawns in this section, and to make matters worse, it's a green monkey, so you have to deal with everything we're seeing here on top of missiles being fired at you. It's not easy. It's rough. Something you can do to make it easier, though, is if you try to use the super hoop to get ahead of the monkey without just trying to catch them first, because especially if you get around a corner and do that, they will immediately try to run back around towards the now closed door, and you can potentially corner them off there. The big thing you have to avoid there is, in that case rather, is not getting hit, because if you get hit, they'll just run right past you again. And now we have a mini-boss. This totem right out of the first level of Banjo-Kazooie, honestly. It rotates fire all over the place, but if you stand right in front of it on the very bottom of this platform, you can just do a swing forward with the stun club, and the very peak of the animation will still make contact, meaning you don't have to actually put yourself in any danger for this mini-boss. Upon taking care of it, this coffin's going to open, and there's a monkey within it, but I find the hitbox for this one's a little bit weird in that I don't think it's an active hitbox until it jumps out of the coffin. Like, I'm swinging directly at it right now, but it's not active, and now that it's out of it, it is. I think Ape Escape 3 has like 2 monkeys in coffins like that, and I think they're in Egypt-themed stages, I think. Again, it's been a hot minute since I played Ape Escape 3. Yeah, they outright make these 2 monkeys that you have to circle around over and over for very unfair deliberately, because you're not supposed to be here yet, technically. You really are not meant to do this section until you have the propeller. You can get the monkey on the platform, the monkey just outside the temple, and the one in the coffin before getting a lot of these tools. But it's going to be very precise to get out otherwise. That's a level that you really should save the revisit for. With that said, we're now about to head into Cryptic Relics for the revisits through the levels, and this is one of my favorite levels to do on the second lap through levels if I do the lap method instead of just going back the moment I get a new tool, as it's one of those levels that really gets completely redefined by the tool set the further you get into the game. As there's shortcuts for the magic punch in here, you can use the RC car instead of certain things to completely break certain puzzle elements, you can use the propeller to completely ignore the slingshot switches. I like it when games make the tool set so tightly developed mechanically that if you use them smartly, revisiting earlier areas just completely changes in terms of, like, it completely redefines level design. And in a way, games like Metroid Dread do that well as well, but I feel for a game like Ape Escape that's very, like, individual level, semi-collectathon focused, that sort of thing is very important to making a sense of progression that feels natural. Because in games like, what's a good example? I guess Banjo-Kazooie, where your progression of abilities is just talking to Bubbles, and at that point, not backtracking at all. The level design has to accompany for the abilities you'll only have at that point, and will always only have at that point. But it makes cases like the one case in Banjo-Kazooie you have to backtrack to a different world at least once, be it for Gobi's Desert or Freezeezy Peak, stand out and feel interesting. With that said, there is a limit. For instance, Banjo-Tooie is tooie much, to put it lightly. That's, I feel, a sense of progression that gets completely destroyed by the scale at which they're trying to build a game. Now, this is actually the earliest instance of an RC car monkey in the game, and it's here we really see something I talked about earlier when we first got the RC car, and that technically the moment that a monkey is crawling, or at least near the exit, you can still catch them because the net can clip through the fence wall, so to speak. So a lot of the monkeys you can be a little bit more aggressive with catching as long as they're near the hole. But say like the one back in Monkey Madness that was in a giant under like fenced in area that I had to just guide to like one of 3 or 4 different RC car entrances, that mechanic is still rough. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 13, we're going to be continuing on through our second lap of levels, getting a whole bunch done in the process. See you guys Then,